child with special needs, and today I'm continuing with this theme of mental health and the sight impaired child. And yesterday we were looking at the issue of over supporting a child and the effect on their mental well-being. The goal of support is independence. The role of a learning support assistant, as well as making the curriculum accessible and making sure the child is safe, is to foster their ability to work without them. In other words, to make themselves redundant in a way. The whole reason for being, the raison d'etre of an LSA is to make themselves redundant, to do themselves out of a job sort of thing. It's to bring the child to a place where they are no longer needed, where they are independent. And that's the goal of any kind of support, really, is to help a child to deal with things on their own. In the real world, no child will have the luxury of an LSA to help them around. Instead, they will encounter obstacles and difficulties, hazards and dangers. They'll have to work it out for themselves. Sometimes standing back and doing nothing, and instead encouraging them to work things out for themselves, is better than doing everything for them. I want now to look at the question of how we can spot the signs when they appear. How do we know if a child has a mental health difficulty? Children may say to an adult, "Miss, I've cut my finger." But they'll rarely say, "Miss, I'm afraid," or "Miss, I feel sad." With any mental health difficulty, there will be some obvious signs to look for. A normally even-tempered child suddenly starts to become irritable, flying off the handle. They may start talking negatively and critically about themselves. The child who is usually happy and motivated suddenly shows no interest, lacks motivation, and just seems to give up. A child usually full of confidence seems to suddenly want reassurance and approval. Lack of concentration, tiredness, school avoidance, stomach aches. These can all be signs of mental distress. Body language is also an indicator. Most of our communication is through body language, and it's usually unconscious. Look out for slow, sluggish movements, closed body gestures like crossed arms, and few words with long pauses. A bent back, head bowed down, a bad posture. These can all signify that there's a problem to a trained observer. So once you have identified a child in some form of mental health difficulty, where do you go? If a child with a vision impairment is in crisis, it is important to find the right person to help. In school, there are people such as the educational psychologist or counsellor, and they may help, though they may not feel competent to talk about the visual aspects of it, a vision loss. There's no direct pathway to the child and adult mental health service in the UK, and besides, the threshold for referral is actually very high, and there's a long waiting list. The first ports of call might be the RNIB or the RSBC, but their capacity is limited. RSBC have family engagement workers who are actually trained and offer emotional support for all family members, which is free and not limited to time. Some hospitals like Moorfields in London and Great Ormond Street have their own counsellors. There are many children's mental health charities too, but often they do not have expertise with vision impairment. Teachers of the visually impaired rarely have counselling training or skills, and even if they do, they're not fully trained counsellors by and large. But we can, of course, listen. Any adult can listen to a child, and we can listen to the family, and we can work closely with the school and try to liaise with all the services. We can also offer advice to counselling services to ensure they understand what it means to have a visual impairment, and we can make recommendations to schools to encourage them to reduce the pressure, the stress upon the child. You see, we don't have to be psychotherapists to help. We can all become more informed about the mental health challenges our children face. Counselling is not currently part of the training for a teacher of visually impaired. Maybe we should have some aspects of counselling included in the course, but we can start by finding out as much as we can about childhood mental health and well-being. And there are courses online, and there are courses on the occasional in-service training. Let me ask you, if you are a teacher of the visually impaired, do you actually take time to listen to your students? And I'm not talking about counselling, which requires training. I'm just talking about simply talking and listening. I have found that just talking directly about issues a young person is facing can be very informative. And very often all a child or young person wants is someone to listen to them. They want to talk to somebody. Talking is incredibly helpful. I'm convinced that our students want to talk and need to know there is someone there who cares about them enough to give them time. Sometimes parents are the last people they'll want to talk to about their emotional and mental health difficulties. But what talking does is somehow to normalise a situation, to objectify it. By talking about their struggles and their feelings openly with students, it helps to make them feel normal. You see, we need to stop treating mental health as something fearful and shameful, but just as something normal. Just like Princes Harry and William talked about their struggles after their mother's death, secrecy and bottling up are not good strategies. And there are a number of public figures now who talk about their own struggles and do a lot to raise public awareness about mental health problems. I mentioned Molly Burke in the first video. Molly Burke has her own YouTube channel, which I recommend to anyone. She talks at great length about her struggles and her difficulties, and it's very informative, and it's helpful to anyone who's interested in the subject, and also to students themselves. There are books written, books of poetry by people like Dave Steele, who logs his own journey to blindness in rhyme. There are resources like this that can inform and help us understand what it really feels like to be blind.